Man, just tell me a story. Welcome to Recotopia, a happy home for recommended movies, TV shows, music, video games, foodstuffs, and more from three people you can definitely trust. Trustability varies by region, no guarantees implied. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Atkinson, Jeremy Scott, and Aaron Dicer.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Hello, everybody. It's episode 148 of Recotopia. I'm Chris Atkinson, joined by Aaron Dicer.
Hidely-ho, Lunarinos.
Lunarinos. And we're also joined by Jeremy Scott.
Hey, that's me.
Decked out into his Orioles orange today. Today's big recommend is going to be Apollo 13. A great movie from the 90s. Can't wait to start talking about that. And we'd like to welcome chat here who've come out here to watch us talk about movies on a Tuesday. Thank you so much for coming out today. Let's get on to our small recommends.
It's no big deal.
Itty bitty living space.
It's so small and light.
It's small, it's tiny, it's petite, it's wee.
Aaron, what do you got?
I watched, with all the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary stuff that's been going on, I'm a huge fan of SNL, and so I watched the Beyond Saturday Night specials that I believe are on Peacock, and there are 4 of them, and they're each like these little documentaries of different aspects of Saturday Night Live, and I found all 4 of them fascinating. The first one, I think, is called 5 Minutes, and it really is a testament to the audition process at Saturday Night Live. So they have all of this footage you've never seen of every Saturday Night Live cast member auditioning for the show and what their auditions were, as these cast members are talking about what it was like to go through that audition process, those kind of things. And when I say every, I clearly don't mean literally every, but there are so many of these SNL people from past and present in these conversations. It's clear that this meant a lot to them to kind of have this time. So that one's really interesting. The second one is about the writing process, and it follows the writing team from like for a full week leading up to an episode. It was the episode Ayo Edebiri was on. And so you see like everything that happens behind the scenes with how sketches are written, how that all works. You know, most people when they see Saturday Night Live just think the people in the sketches, you know, sat down together and wrote something funny together and don't realize that for the most part, these are written by other people who then assign cast members to the sketches. Now, there is crossover, obviously, with writers and cast members. So that was really interesting and really tweaked part of my writing process brain, especially comedy writing, and the way that, you know, that they do that and talk about that and have been doing it for 50 years. Again, that's the other part of this. It's been going on for 50 years, this show. The third one is a in-depth, complete breakdown of the cowbell sketch. It is an hour to an hour and a half. I forget the running time, but it is a documentary style length breakdown of one sketch in SNL history. And again, blew me away with all the things I had no idea about that moment. Anyways, it's a lot of fun. It's definitely worth watching, in my opinion. Even if you aren't like a huge Saturday Night Live fan, I think it's in the pop culture consciousness enough that you're still going to enjoy a lot of this.
Saturday Night Live is a lot like soccer to me. Like, you know, when I was a teenager, that wasn't the case. But now it's like there is absolute gold magic that happens. But it's few and far between for me.
Sure.
Like that Beavis and Butthead sketch from this season was hysterical. And apparently the writer who played one of them, Mikey something?
Mikey Day.
He was trying to get that sketch made for years. But I can't watch a whole episode hoping that this week will have some gold in it. So I've become a guy who consumes after the fact. But SNL is still part of my blood. Like, man, from the time I was 12 or 13, we would like sneak on the black and white TV upstairs in our bedroom and hope mom and dad couldn't hear it so that we would understand everything that everybody was joking about at school the next day. So between the movie and the 50th celebration and these documentary shows, they're having quite a year.
I really love hearing these behind. I'm going to definitely watch this. Where is this, by the way? It's going to be in
Peacock.
the NBC Peacock.
Yeah.
I really enjoy hearing these behind the scenes things especially from the writers and everything. I've like last month or so, I was watching a bunch of stuff about Steven Seagal's appearance on the show and how bad that was and how horrible it was for everybody and all that. But Hannibal Buress has a little bit about how he was a writer on there and how he had this skit that was just bombing terribly in the dress rehearsal, and you're lucky to even get something to a dress rehearsal sometimes, right. and he was sitting like he was bombing horribly, and then Lorne Michaels turned to him and said, "Well, that was adventurous," or something like that, and walked off. And then there's the stories about sketches that kill while they're doing it, and they go to dress rehearsal and it kills. And then it goes to like the next thing and nobody laughs at it, those type of things. So it really does teach you a lot about what's funny in the moment and why is it funny, and why doesn't it work at one point and it did the entire way there and everything. So yeah, I definitely want to see something on this.
You're going to love this. You're going to love every episode. I didn't mention episode 4 is also a great episode. It follows what's called The Weird Year, season 11. So, Lorne Michaels left the show after a few years and then came back. And it was the year he came back and he just wanted to try something new. It was the one season that Robert Downey Jr. and Joan Cusack and like all these people were on the show for a year. And it was just there was an entire episode that season directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And it's directed like a Coppola film. Like it is the weirdest year of SNL. And so the 4th episode is all about that. It's called The Weird Year. Anyways, they're all 4 of these episodes are really great. So yeah, check them out.
Yeah. Can't wait to see that. All right. I'm going to get into some books again. I'm telling you guys, this might be a world record year for me recommending books on Recotopia. I'm probably going to be reading a little bit more with my time than I've been spending a lot of time over the past year watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. And that's getting to the point where I'm like, all right, I want to change what I do with my time a little bit. So I've mentioned reading this book before, but like reading it to a certain point and then having to stop. But I finally finished House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. And one of the first pages of the book tells you this book is not for you, or this is not for you, or something like that. And I'm like, yep, after you finish this, you'll realize this book's not for Jeremy. This book, I can just imagine Jeremy trying to read this book and just being like, what the fuck is this guy doing? And blah, blah, blah. If I am to really give a synopsis for this book, it is that there is a bunch of documents left behind after a guy dies that this other guy finds, and the documents are all about this sort of a review of a movie called The Navidson Record that this guy has written and put a whole bunch of footnotes into, and this other guy is now translating these notes for us and everything, and he has his own story that goes on during the relating of this other story. And The Navidson Record is about a guy who goes to a house with his I think it's his girlfriend and their two kids. And they start noticing that some of the inside of the house is actually bigger than the outside of the house when they measure it. And as they go and explore this, a door appears out of nowhere one day, and it becomes a thing where you can open up, and there's this hallway where it should go outside. It should go outside to the house, but it's actually another hallway that they go down. And they go through this hallway and they start exploring, and things start getting even bigger and more complex and dark and everything. So that's what the whole the whole thing about the Navidson record is it's a movie that apparently came out that Miramax even put into theaters and everything. And so it's all this discussion about this movie and all these footnotes and all this discussion and breaking down. And it doesn't take long for the book to tell you this movie does not exist. And so there's a whole bunch of things about this where you're sitting there reading this and it's like, this seems like a very big, huge academic journal about a real movie that exists. And it has all these like just well-designed footnotes for it and everything. But you're told pretty early on, this movie does not actually exist. And so like the person who's telling us the story, his name is Johnny, is sort of like translating this for us and saying, you know, he's trying to find the movie, trying to see if it really does exist. Like maybe there was a mistake or whatever, but he's got his own stuff going on at the same time that he details. And so you'll have parts of the book where it's like, this is about the movie, and then underneath it'll be about what he's going through. And then there's sections of the book where they're going through the house and like there's like a paragraph at the bottom, but all white on the page, and then there's a paragraph at the top and all white below it, and then there's like pages with just one word on it and stuff like that. And there's stuff where they're like where you have to follow the words going down like a spiral and all this other stuff. So it's like it's a very, very interesting. Like if you like video games and exploring video games like to the max, and like really getting into what is being said on this thing, and like trying to get your head around what this house is and what this person's going through, you're going to love House of Leaves. If you're a person who's just like, man, just tell me a story, and leave it at that, you're probably not going to like something like House of Leaves. And I will say that I read this book when I first started reading this book. I kind of like wanted to read everything because that's the way I am about things. And I'd go to the footnotes, and the footnotes would just tell you, well, this is from this source that may not even exist. I just stopped reading the footnotes after a while and just started reading the story and reading the story from Johnny and all that. And then by the end of it, there's a thing where Johnny talks about, you know, he's talking about an incident with his mom where his mom hurt him and she got sent to a psychiatric ward and all this other stuff. The letters that she writes back and forth between him and her at it's very end of the book in the appendices or whatever. It's heartbreaking. So there's a lot in here. There's a lot of mystery, and there's a lot of like, you know, and there's a lot of like really good dramatic things and a lot of things to interpret. And I have to recommend it because it's very just interesting. And I've just gotten off of reading this book. There's so many things that people have done on the internet that have gone deep on this book. They've gone deep on it, and they have come up with their own interpretations of what's happening and what's going on and who's the actual author of this and all of that type of thing. And so I find this fascinating and figured I would tell others about that who might be interested in something like that.
Man, just tell me a story.
This sounds right up my alley. I love this kind of free thinking.
I think you'd love the book.
Yeah, I think I would really love this. It reminds me of a book I got into in college called The Eternal Golden Braid, Escher Gödel Bach, and it basically was about how M.C. Escher and Bach and this mathematician named Gödel all had these creative ways to look at the world, and then the book itself, you know, kind of plays with some of those forms and factors. And yeah, I just love outside the box kind of stuff like this. So yeah,
I think this is up your alley, and if you have some time to carve out for it, I think you'll very much enjoy it and want to talk about it afterwards. Like, I don't know anybody in my circle who has read this book, so I can't really. I've been trying to go on the internet and look at what other people have been saying and stuff like that, and I've seen some really, really fun and interesting interpretations of what is going on. To me, I kind of simplified it, and at the end of it, I said, you know what? That's a really good human story. By the end of it, I will also tell you this has almost every trigger warning imaginable in it. There's almost everything that you would that someone would find, a little bit triggery. There's a lot of that in there, and it's very casual in the way it talks about it. So anyway, thought I would finally say, hey, I finally read this book. I can recommend it now, and I'm probably going to read it again sometime.
Nice.
All right. Well, my small recommend for this week is a movie called Flow. It's now in theaters, or you can pay to rent or buy it on Amazon and streaming places, which is what I did. Chris joked recently when we were talking about this that this might be based on the video game Stray, and it easily could be. It's essentially that game meets Life of Pi, kind of. This movie is one of the least conventional films I have ever seen in my life. It doesn't do what movies do.
Just tell me a story.
Well, what's funny about that is this is a very straightforward story. It's maybe the most simplistic story possible. Cat in some kind of post-apocalyptic world lives in this little house. Flood happens. Cat has to scurry and find high ground in the process of avoiding the flood, meets with other animals, and collectively they try and survive this disaster. That may be all I'm going to tell you, but this movie is more like a dream than it is a film, which is what I mean by that is it allows so much interpretation on the part of the viewer that I think I could make a case for several different interpretations as far as what this movie means, what it's trying to say, what actually happens at the end. But I really feel like this movie, I can't stop thinking about it, man. It's so simple. It's gorgeously animated, they used a free software called Blender to animate this film. But it looks like nothing I've ever seen. Clearly, the people that made this movie have had cats for 50 or 60 years of their lives, because there is so much about what the cat does, the sounds it makes, the motions it makes. It's just, it's a cat. It feels real, even though the animation is not photorealistic. Behaviors of the other animals as well. I'm really fumbling with my words. I should have written this up ahead of time, but I can't recommend this enough. But just know going in, it's not like anything you've ever seen. There's no dialogue. There's no people. The director himself has said, why has it flooded? I don't care. That's not interesting to me. Why are there not people around? I don't care. That's not interesting to me. What's interesting is this cat's journey. And if you kind of just accept all that, I think I liked it a lot more than my wife, because I think she was expecting a much more conventional story, plot, what have you. In almost any place where you might predict what's going to happen next, you're wrong. I promise. I can't wait to watch it again.
Yeah, I finished. I finished Flow, and no kidding. My first thought was, "Oh, they made a movie just for Jeremy." It just felt like a Jeremy movie when I watched it, and part of that's that it's a cat, and I know how much you love your cats, and part of that is that I think it appeals to that abstract storytelling thing that you dig, taking the simple and making it beautiful. So yeah, it's great. It's worth a watch, definitely. It's good stuff.
All right, let's get on to our big recommend.
I'm fine. It's just that you're so big.
It's so huge.
It's a good rule, but this is bigger than rules.
It's bigger on the inside.
Is it? I noticed.
Which is Apollo 13, and this is Aaron's choice. So take it away, Aaron.
All right. Apollo 13 is the 13th movie in the Apollo franchise, but by most considered to be the only one that matters. Directed by Ron Howard, the movie was released in 1995 and made $355 million at the box office, which, not a joke, is the exact same amount it's estimated to have cost to put men on the moon in 1969. The movie begins, as all great things do, with some news Cronkite's-position about the space program. This leads into an Apollo 11 moon landing party at Jim Lovell's house, where we get the quick astronaut character rundown. Kevin Bacon's Jack Swigert is, and by the way, can we stop? It's spelled Swigert, but I swear everybody says Swaggart in this movie.
It's Swaggart or Swigert, I believe.
Yeah.
They say Swigert really fast, and it sounds like Swaggart, but I think Swaggart is generally what it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, then I will just go back and forth. Jack Swigert is using a beer bottle to simulate sex. Gary Sinise's Ken Mattingly and Bill Paxton's Fred Hayes look at moon pictures and wish they were there. And Tom Hanks' Jim Lovell brings in some more refreshments for everyone because he's the stand-up leader type this country needs. After the party finishes, Jim and his wife Marilyn, played by Kathleen Quinlan, chat in the backyard about the scope of it all. And Lovell gives the finger to the moon because they will now be mortal enemies. Back at work, Jim is giving a tour, and when Mr. Know-It-All doubts if there will even be an Apollo 14, but it turns out it doesn't even matter as Lovell's team is being bumped up to Apollo 13, which is good news for everyone because they had already named the movie. Next up, it's Halloween, and we see the impact of modesty culture on America's teenagers and families. Oh, and we start getting a sense that Marilyn is going to be very anxious about this whole thing. Cut to a training session where the Lovell crew show their expertise with a perfect docking simulation. But Mr. Perfectionist Mattingly wants it to be even more perfect somehow, so Kevin Bacon and the rest of the B team will have to wait. We get some more wife fear as she wakes from a fake-out nightmare and says she won't be going to the launch. The launch continues to get closer as pictures are taken, interviews are given, and superstitions are super hilarious. Now it's all systems go. Well, except for that part where Ken Mattingly hasn't had the measles yet, so he can't go to space because apparently some marvelous Mr. Measle on the backup crew. Lovell isn't happy, but the call goes out to Swigert, who is busy choosing one of the most inefficient ways possible to shower at the time. Elsewhere, Lovell lets Mattingly know what's happened and takes the weight of the decision on his own shoulders, because that's what cool integrity dudes do. Remember them? We're just a few days out from launch, and Swigert is now in the simulator, and he is sucking big time. But the crew presses on, and suddenly it's launch eve. And as the music swells, Marilyn shows up to support her husband after all, even if she doesn't care about him enough to secure her ring in the shower. Although, when it does go down the drain, she turns off the shower, showing at least one person in this movie understands the importance of water conservation. It's now T-minus is it getting dusty in here until launch as we watch mechanical miracles and think about the insanity that humans somehow found a way to leave their planet and land on the moon 50 years ago when computers were just babies, giant babies that took up entire rooms and were a lot more fussy. We now meet the control room, headed up by Ed Harris's Gene Kranz, as he checks in with all the different departments needed to make sure things are running smoothly. The tears flow and the cheers are heard because the launch is successful. And can someone clue me in on Mattingly's secret launch viewing spot? Because he somehow has a perfect close-up view of everything, and he's the only one there.
Yeah.
I need to know where that is.
He's an astronaut, man. He's got access to special
He's
spots.
got all those secrets.
It may not surprise you that didn't happen. So there you go.
The early checks go well, and the movie gives us a lesson we didn't ask for about how vomit works in zero-G. Swigert docks to connect to the limb, and clearly this mission is going to go smoothly from here on out. After a routine urine dump that makes it look like the Apollo astronauts have 30-gallon bladders, we set up a broadcast from the mission that the networks don't want to carry. They said it's because it was boring, but I'm guessing it had more to do with a copyright strike that was threatened after Fred decided to play Spirit in the Sky. Also, side note, if Jim Lovell had been in the band The Beatles, they would have never broken up. Okay, that's for Lovell's daughter. I just wanted her to know that. All is quiet on the space stern front, but then an oxygen stir tank causes Lovell to say something Texan fans have already been quite familiar with for some time. Houston, we have a problem. Everyone goes into problem-solving mode, and then Lovell spots something out of the window. They are venting oxygen out into space, and that is not good because they would kind of like to keep that inside with them. And now it's time for the movie to enter into a full-throated tribute to calm humans in hard situations, making hard decisions and solving hard problems. Clint Howard, with some of his best acting ever, communicates that they need to close the react valves to stop the leak, even though that means no more landing on the moon. But then that doesn't work. The command module is still dying. So it's time to move to the LIM, which is now a lifeboat, to try to get them home. But there are numbers to crunch, and the computer has to transfer the guide info over to the LIM. So they now have 15 minutes to power up the LIM, even though it's supposed to be a 3-hour process. Back at home, the word is getting out, but not to Mattingly, who takes his phone off the hook and turns off the TV just as the report is breaking in. A result, obviously, of all that training he did at NASA in the dramatic timing simulator. Back at NASA, Kranz is having a meeting with the control room about the new mission. That mission, get them home. It's not important what things were built to do now. It's important what they can do, he says. They decide to use the moon's gravity for the return trajectory so they don't have to fire up a possibly damaged engine. The guys are now in the midst of a full Pink Floyd, but when Lovell is asked if he wants to see Mount Marilyn, he basically responds, "Been there, done that," and we're all disappointed no one responded with, "Yeah, you have."
Hey.
Back in Control Center, another problem raises its head, of course. The battery doesn't have enough time to get them home, and the LIM is going to need to power all the way down. Someone does an in-person wake-up call finally for Ken Mattingly, and it's time for him to figure out how to land the simulation with the conditions the guys are gonna have. Next up is the CO2 problem. Somehow the filters on the control in the LIM are completely different shapes, and the phase put a square peg in a round hole is born. In one of the movie's best moments, a group of engineers is instructed they have to make this fit into a hole meant for this using only this. Instructions, I swear, were written by Jeremy's college girlfriend.
Hey-o.
Back on the ship, our 3 castaways not only don't have a volleyball to personify, but they are now arguing about the line of trajectory, casting blame, and giving each other STDs. Houston gives them the news about the CO2 and starts to walk them through how to put together the new filter. For our younger listeners, it would be like looking up a YouTube assembly video, but the video's just audio and it's also really crackly. Meanwhile, Van Cleef from Shanghai Noon leads a press conference as the world waits to hear what's happened. But the steely-eyed missile man gets on to the next problem as Mattingly continues to work tirelessly to figure out the reentry process. Elsewhere, Marilyn takes the kids to see Grandma and let her know what's going on and to comfort her. But she turns the tables on them and does the comforting herself with some next-level thinking about flying washing machines. Back on the ship, the crew is freezing and sick and tired of being told how sick and tired they are. So they remove their biosensors, which is clearly irresponsible, but also apparently hilarious to Christoph in the control room. NASA then figures out what Swaggart already knew, and that there has to be an adjustment made so that they can hit the side of a piece of paper and get back to the basketball. In one of the most tense scenes in the movie, the boys have to do a manual burn to get back on course by keeping the Earth visible in the window. The movie then thinks we want some more character work on Lovell, so we see him giving an interview about how he finds his way home using what he must have learned at the James Cameron School of Bioluminescing Things. On to the next problem, Mattingly still has to cut 4 more amps off his reentry procedure, and never has an amperage meter been so full of tension. But he does it, and it's time to rush Mattingly and the procedure back to the guys floating in a frozen tin can in space. Oh, and let them know that Ken never got the measles. Back at the Lovell home, someone drops a salad and inexplicably starts shoveling the floor pieces back into the upright bowl of salad that could have been saved. Sorry. On the spaceship, as they continue to go through the process of getting this toaster through the car wash without getting electrocuted, they remember that they have to account for the couple 100 pounds of moon rocks that they do not have. And so we get a sense for the incredible amount of detail that has to be right for this all to work. They push button after button, and Fred congratulates Swaggart on following directions, so we know they're friends again. The boys get their first look at the damaged craft after ejecting it, and we're all amazed that they're even alive looking at that thing, and that Lovell is trying to describe it in words instead of just pulling out his phone and taking a picture. They then cut loose the lunar module, and as it floats away, Jim ponders how the thing that represents everything he lost on this trip also represents everything that saved him. And now it's time to re-enter. As the naysayers talk about how this could be the biggest disaster in NASA history, Kranz turns it on its head and mentions that Chris Pine boat movie for some reason. Not sure how that has to do with anything. And then we wait. The family waits. The control room waits. The press waits. Walter Cronkite waits. The ocean waits. The helicopters wait. And just when Ron Howard is sure he has tension edged us to exactly the right moment, a parachute appears and the entire world explodes in ecstasy as Opie smiles in satisfaction at his Sting-level tantric-style movie making. Finally, some level voiceover lets us know what happened with each of our main players and that he still looks up at the sky and realizes that the moon is in a new phase, and so is he. And that is Apollo 13. What did you guys think?
Hated it. Just tell me a story. Kidding.
No, I guess we've got a new catchphrase now, don't we? Yeah, Apollo 13 is fantastic. I just going all over the place here. The shot of the control room while they're waiting for the ship to re-enter is one of my favorite things all time, because it's a bunch of, the scene that you just described where everybody's waiting and waiting and waiting. That James Horner score that's going on during this thing is so good. But that shot, that's the first time we've seen the full control room in its glory. Everybody's in there. Everybody's at their post. And it's just this one static shot of all of them sitting there waiting in anticipation. I love that. That James Horner score, by the way, love it. But it also seems to borrow from Sneakers quite a bit. There's a lot of Sneakers in this score that if you're really attuned to Sneakers, you hear a lot of. I don't know if it's the same stuff or if he's just kind of tweaked it a little bit, but he's got some other stuff in there too. But that scene where they finally come up with the right power level thing after Ken Mattingly's in the simulator, and you hear that jangling piano. That's in Sneakers. The one where you hear the chorus in the back, the light choral arrangement or whatever, that's in Sneakers for sure. Anyway, this was in the middle of Tom Hanks just had become the biggest star in the world. Like, it was funny. He was definitely a decent star for a while. And I think Sleepless in Seattle really kicked it off to where he, and then Philadelphia winning the Oscar for that. And then Forrest Gump just kind of put him in the stratosphere at that point. And then now anything that he's in, people are just like, yeah, I got to watch that Tom Hanks movie. But he's obviously really good. And from hearing the commentary, I watched this movie also with the commentary from Jim Lovell and Marilyn Lovell. Talking about how well he got a lot of his mannerisms down and everything like that. Even just the smallest things, like the scene where they're telling Ken he can't show up, he can't come along with them. The way he's sitting there, Marilyn's like, this isn't exactly something that you do. It's so close to it and everything. So they get a lot of the details right, obviously, in this. But the big differences. I mean, almost everything in this movie that you see happened. All the little problems happened. The way they solved them happened. But there were obviously a lot of dramatic liberties taken. Like, there was never infighting on the shuttle. There wasn't any of that going on. Hayes and Swaggart didn't have this this big fight about anything. They're making Swaggart out to be like some borderline incompetent, which you can't be to get into space. To be in NASA, you can't be that.
I read that person he's playing wrote the manual for the LEM or whatever. Like, he literally wrote the book.
Yeah.
And the movie makes it sound like, well, and even Hanks and Paxton's characters are both accomplished pilots. Like, there was not really a pilot problem, but the movie had to create that tension.
Yeah, exactly. So and even the stuff on the ground too, where people are fighting about what they're going to do and all that, that's not really anything that happened. Kranz doesn't kick something, asking for the procedures and everything. The interesting thing though to find out is when you see that, for instance, the air filter problem with the square peg and the round hole and all that type of stuff. that was already solved. They had come up with that back in, I think, Apollo 8 is what I had heard when I was looking at stuff about this. They had already known that procedure. So in the movie, I think there's nothing wrong with the way the movie is doing this, by the way, at all. I don't think its job is to be like, let's do this 100% accurately. Because if you did, like, if you listen to the radio, the stuff that actually is happening, like Lovell's like, Houston, we've had a problem. It's like, it's not really, they're just very calmly solving problems. They might be inside, they might be going, oh shit, but they know that yelling and screaming isn't going to get them anywhere. But like, yeah, that procedure, obviously they had to have done it at some point, the way it's portrayed in the movie, where they're like, we've got to somehow make these filters work. They had to do that at some point. So instead of like showing it when it actually happened, they're putting it right here in the middle of the action, and that's fine. The procedure to get the power back on too. Now, this is the one big conflict that I saw in the movie. With the research was one source, and I watched a history buffs video, the YouTube history buffs, talking about how that procedure was had already been solved too. The thing about the power, where Ken goes in there and goes in the simulator, that had been solved. But then when I'm listening to the Jim Lovell commentary, he said, yeah, we weren't getting the procedures for the longest time, and I was actually getting really worried about it. And so I hear that procedure had already been in place, but they were just trying to figure out for sure that it would work. And maybe that's what he's referring to, that they were just making absolutely sure that this one procedure that they had come up with really did work. And they were going overboard on it when there was not enough time. They just go ahead and give them that procedure. By God, just go ahead, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We tried our best, So anyway, this movie is just amazing on its detail, and the dramatic is perfectly aligned. And we've talked about this before. Ron Howard does his best when it comes to these biopic type movies. Rush is a great movie. What was that one movie with the survival down the caves and
13
everything?
Lives.
What was that one called? It had 13 in the
Lives.
title too. 13 Lives. Yeah, that one's another one. I mean, like Ron Howard, when he does those movies, is on his A game, and I just this movie like never feels like it's 2 hours and 12 minutes that it is before credits. It never feels that way. I'm sitting there watching it, and it's like suddenly there's an hour gone, and I really, 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 really love it. So
I was struck this time by the camera work, and I'm going to show some ignorance here. So I looked it up, and the cinematographer was Dean Cundy, who shot Jurassic Park and the Back to the Future movies. So no wonder this movie looks great. And Ron Howard, I noticed when I was doing research, said that the launch sequence is probably, in his opinion, the most cinematic thing he's ever created. So I paid extra close attention to that when that scene happened, and he may be right. It's flawless. It's nearly perfect. I think it's funny to compare the way Lovell is portrayed in this movie as far as how he treats his friends and family. Compare and contrast that with First Man and how Neil Armstrong is portrayed in the way that he treats his friends and family, because he's a dickhead in that movie. And Lovell is just, I mean, may just be the Hanksness of it all. But the script as well showed that he was a nice guy. I did not realize until this viewing that the steely-eyed missile man line in The Martian actually comes from this movie.
Yeah. I think I even mentioned that before.
Yeah, I did not realize that. Here's a note that I wanted to make sure I read. Oh my God, the cigarettes. If the story about the algae guiding him back to the aircraft carrier is real,
it is.
Fuck. Because it's too. I know the wedding ring falling in the drain was criticized by viewers, but then it actually happened.
It's real.
So that's what that speech about the algae drives me nuts, man, because it is just too neat story-wise.
Yeah.
It fits too perfectly. And I have to believe maybe it didn't air when the movie says she got to see it.
No. Well, this is an interesting thing in the Lovell commentary, is that it was never an interview. It was never anything that was recorded for something like that, or whatever.
But the event happened.
The event happened. He wrote it in the book Lost Moon, which is what this movie bases a lot of its stuff on. The algae thing actually happened, but he wrote it in the book. It was never an interview.
Okay.
That they have so expertly are able to put in to soothe all the viewers watching.
Okay, good.
Because that did not happen. So
that was way too neat. And I was just like, man, I love it from a writing perspective, but it's too perfect to have happened this way. But I'm glad the actual story is real, because that's a pretty neat story.
Yeah.
Ed Harris is fantastic in this movie, but his character's optimism drives me insane, because at the very end, when they are brought back home safe and alive, you can tell he was faking that optimism, and he was really fucking worried. But he was screaming at people about, "They're gonna live, we're gonna make them back." And then the guy's like, "Just tell them 3-1 odds." The ending is kind of dark. Like, if you Swigert got elected to Congress, but he died of cancer before he could take office. And this guy Hayes was going to go up on this mission, but they canceled that mission, and it's just kind of, it's sad. Okay, so here's the thing that I wrote that I want to read, because I feel like all the primary actors in this movie do great work, and they get a lot of love, especially Hanks and Quinlan, and it's deserved. But all of the NASA supporting dudes, this is one of the most stacked, oh my God, it's that guy casts ever. So I'm going to read through what I wrote. The supporting cast is the music agent from That Thing You Do, the au pair from Jerry Maguire, the investigator brother from Gattaca, Xander Berkeley from Everything Xander Berkeley's in, Dave McFly from Back to the Future 2, the guy who plays T.C. Fornell in NCIS, Clint Howard from all the Ron Howard movies, the guy from The Fugitive who went temporarily deaf because Sam Gerard fired right near his ear, Matt Damon's right-hand man from Ford v Ferrari, the abducted congressman from Dark Knight Rises, Jeffrey Blake who played Fisher in Contact and Wesley in Forrest Gump, Major General Gordon Biff Cresswell from Jag, Seaman Beaumont from Hunt for Red October, Christian Clemson who played Jerry Espenson on Boston Legal and Dr. Tom Lohman on CSI Miami, Jim Meskimen is in there, a talented impressionist who I believe Chris once interviewed. The NASA supporting cast is stacked, man.
Yeah, it really is. And that's another thing, by the way, that I love this movie does during the waiting part of it, is that it will go and focus on one of those people, and you are reminded of how many people it took to get this shuttle back down. Like, you may have forgotten after the problem is over, you may have forgotten about those people, but the movie remembers them, and it shows you, hey, there's this isn't just a couple of guys saying this is what you need to do. This is the whole control room. Just think about, if Clint Howard's character doesn't do what he does, they are fucked, because he tells them, we have to do this now or else they're not even going to have oxygen. Forget about the moon. And imagine what kind of imagine what it takes to tell somebody, like, look, this isn't going to happen. I know that this whole thing we've set up is to go to the moon and collect rocks and all this other stuff, but we're not doing that now. Now we're worried about survival right now. We're not worried about anything like that. So I just think about all these different players in there that, it just keeps showing in there. By the way, I think it's I don't know. I think in real life it was like this too, but like, they kind of shit on that doctor quite a bit. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like, what are you supposed to do if you're in his position?
He even says, no, I never got the measles, and then looks over and glares at him, man. Like,
yeah, like, and even Lovell in the commentary kind of gives a little shot at him a little bit, and is like, well, he never got the measles, and blah, 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 and all like that. It's like, yeah, but isn't the point of what the doctor says is if you were exposed to somebody with the measles, not to put somebody up there who might have fucking measles by the time it gets there's a little bit too much of that in here. I know that they're trying to get some dramatic license. Some dramatic license isn't necessary. The guy who's apparently built the limb and is worried about all this other stuff. That was one thing that Lovell was talking about in the commentary, was like, they kind of give this guy bad rap. You know, he wasn't like that. He wasn't concerned about any of this type of stuff, but they make him look like he's just a businessman worried about his ass if this lunar module doesn't do what it wasn't made to do. So anyway,
that scene though,
yeah, doesn't he have a line where it's like, what a spaceship, or something, like after it succeeds or whatever, and
hey,
like,
how about that limb, huh?
How about that limb, guys?
That scene though where he finds out about they're pulling Mattingly, Hanks's character even says in that office, "This is flight surgeon bullshit," or whatever. And I wonder if there's not some built-in animosity between astronauts and the people who could decide whether they get to go up or not.
There definitely is.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. There's the idea of being too cautious, and a lot of these guys are military guys. They were pilots. They've been through all the worst. So it's like, I'm not scared of a couple of, I'm not scared of measles coming into the play or whatever and all that, but you just don't want to have somebody suddenly have an outbreak while they're in space. I mean, that's the point of the whole thing. So anyway, maybe that's something that's real, and astronauts really do have that kind of animosity towards their doctors, and that's like a thing like that is really super controversial. I don't know, but I felt like they gave him a lot of shit when they didn't need to in all of this.
It was one of the main things watching through this time that I noticed. I had in my notes was that medical antagonism throughout the whole thing. I kind of joked about it in the synopsis too, because it's one of those things where it's like, we're honoring the ingenuity and amazingness of science, except medicine. Those guys, what are they? What are they doing?
That's not real science.
Because seriously, they like rip their sensors off, and it's like everybody's like, just a little medical mutiny, buddy. It's like, that's important stuff to know.
Which is another,
it all matters.
And that's another thing Lovell talked about. That actually happened too. He pulled off his med sensor because he didn't say because it was. They didn't want the doctor reading anything. He didn't want them to know how scared he was, is what he said in real life. Wow. Is why he pulled that off and everything. So I thought that was really interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, watching it again, I think this movie is just astounding. I love this movie so much. The one moment that stood out to me this time with like just an emotional punch that I had forgotten, but it's an emotional punch every time I watch it, is they set it up with a conversation with Lovell and his little boy about, what happened with, the other one. And then just the moment where he's like, was it the door?
Yeah.
Oh, like just kills me every time. Like I just like the, having had tough conversations with children and knowing, that connection. And it's just, yeah, that one slays me every time. The other thing about this movie, it falls into the category of movie, I call them human collectors, where if you're watching it and there are people around, they just sit down and watch it. Like it's one of those movies that people just gravitate towards. And it got me thinking, like a fun experiment would be to like just set up 100 chairs somewhere public, start a movie, and just see who stops in to watch it and if the chairs fill up. But a movie like this, those 100 chairs are full because people just lock in. And yeah, so I just love movies like that where it's like, oh yeah, I may have seen this movie 5 times, 50 times, 500 times. Let's lock in. I want to watch it again. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, so good.
That was another thing that I loved about the movie too is it foreshadows a little bit of what is going to happen with the machine up in space when Jim and Marilyn are in their Corvette or whatever, Porsche. I can't remember if it was a Corvette. I think it was Corvette. Well, that they're at a stoplight and it doesn't want to start right away, and then there's the so it, it shows you that when you're dealing with machines, there's so much unpredictable stuff going on with it and everything. But like there's a really minor thing in there that I love too, where Kranz comes in there and he wants to put on the overhead projector and it doesn't work right away. And so like it's like, well, what do you do if the overhead projector doesn't work? Okay, well, our next thing is to go to the chalkboard. We don't want to do it on the chalkboard, but we're going to do it on the chalkboard because that's what we've got in front of us and everything. So it just shows you the sort of the, it's not a major thing, but it just shows you the type of thing that we're dealing with here. Hey, if this machine doesn't work, we got to go on to the next thing and do that. It reminds me too, I was a projectionist when this movie was playing, and I remember a sold out auditorium for this thing. And we had one of the, Jeremy is familiar with fail safes and is familiar with if a movie breaks and the fail safe doesn't catch it. This happened to Apollo 13.
Oh, no.
And like there was when the fail safe doesn't detect a film break, it means the film will just keep going through the projector and not collect on the platter later. It'll just be collecting underneath the projector the entire time and go into a huge pile underneath. Finally, that pile gets so big that the film doesn't have anywhere else to go, and then you have what a lot of people have seen, and when things were in 35 millimeter, the film stopping and burning on the screen and everything. And I just remember too, like I remember that happening and people being all upset and everything. And I turned to my manager and I said, they are watching a movie about how machines break, right? And it does, and there's things that you have to do to fix it, and that type of thing. So I had that.
We just made your experience better. We just brought home the theme, man.
Exactly. I mean, it's like, just you have to understand that we're dealing with machines sometimes, and sometimes they don't operate the way we want to. Okay. Let's get on to our super secret double feature.
Be very, very quiet.
Secret? What secret?
Our dirty little secret.
I tell you something I've never told anyone.
Jeremy, what would you say is your super secret double feature for this?
I'm pretty confident you're not going to take this one, and I do want to acknowledge the absolute perfect double feature is The Martian. I do not like choosing on the nose things, but what you were just saying about Apollo 13 reminded me heavily of the last scene in The Martian where he's teaching the class and he says, this is space. It doesn't cooperate. At some point, something's going to go wrong. And that's when you just start to work. You solve the first problem, and then you move on to the next problem. And if you solve enough problems, you get to come home. And I think the spirit of both of those movies is that. The ingenuity and creativity of the smartest minds at NASA bringing home an astronaut that was very nearly lost. But it's too close. It's too close. I just said a bunch of words about it, but I'm not making that my double feature. Chris stole my thunder. My double feature is 13 Lives, the Ron Howard Rescue in the Caves in Thailand movie, which, again, I believe shows the ingenuity, the audacity it sometimes takes to rescue people in peril. And I just think they would match up really well. I didn't really want to choose another space movie, but there are several good space movies that would match up well. But I go 13 Lives.
And my super secret double feature is The Martian, the movie that Jeremy just said a whole bunch of words about, and I don't need to say any more about. It was funny. He came on to our Slack and said, I'm not going to pick The Martian. I was like, okay, I'll pick it. And then he comes on here and says, I'm not going to pick The Martian. And here's a whole bunch of reasons why.
I'm so sorry. Oh, no.
And I'm not
so confident that it wasn't. I was just like, what if it is, though?
No.
What if it is?
So I'm not afraid to do the obvious one. I like to pick something that's a little off kilter from time to time, but I could not. Every time I was thinking about the way this movie goes, I kept thinking this is the way The Martian does its business. And I think it's a perfect double feature for it. So
I will learn from this. I promise. I will learn from this.
I was briefly considering, because I had a feeling you might do that, just doing mine first, but I don't know. It's not important at all. At all. What we got out of it was a really funny moment, and that's all I care about. So anyway,
I was thinking about, with all the technology fixing the problem things, a very obscure double feature would be Ghost Protocol, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, because that's one of the themes in that movie as well, is like everything in that movie breaks. Every single high-tech thing that they have, which I thought was a really fun spin on Mission Impossible, because it's always about the high-tech gadgets and, you know, what they do. And
well,
yeah, it's interesting.
Then there was one, it was at one point I actually did think of possibly double featuring this with Speed, because Speed has a lot of that too, where there's you have one main problem, but there are so many other little problems that happen due to this. That's the thing that I love about Apollo 13 is that every decision they make creates more problems, basically. So like, we've got to go to this place for a while, but that's going to cause a lot of problems that we're going to have to solve while we're there. But we can't worry about that right now. We've got to go over there and do this. And then once we do that, oh, now we're shallowing up. Or, we didn't think about having all the rocks when we were coming back and we miscalculated and everything. That's just stunning type stuff that they have to think about on all this, because they've got everything pre-mapped out. And when something that they were expecting isn't a part of the equation, they have to they have to remember that, oh yeah, we didn't do this and that, and we didn't go on the moon. I love that that dude saying that. But yeah, anyway, all right, so next week is my turn, and we're gonna go into a more lo-fi area this time. We're gonna go to 1971's Duel, Steven Spielberg's movie from it was a TV movie actually, and I think it's had some theatrical releases or at least some revisits over the years, but this came out on TV back in the day, and apparently this is where Spielberg sort of learned a lot about suspense and what informed a lot of his movies going forward after this. So I am looking forward to revisiting this one. I cannot wait to see it again. I haven't seen it in forever. I personally have it on Blu-ray, but I think that you can rent it on Amazon, and that's probably the only place that you can find it. I don't know if there's any other places at this point, but I am really excited for a white knuckle thriller at this point. So that's where we're going next week.
One of my favorite things about this podcast is how it frequently gets me to watch movies I have never seen that are on my list of shame. This is one of them. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this.
Yeah, awesome. Yep. Aaron, you had something to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I just watched this within the last couple of years for the first time. I'm really excited to have this conversation because I have thoughts.
Good.
It was, so yeah, it was, and they're good thoughts, just to be clear. But yeah, Spielberg never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for this week. Once again, chat, thank you for coming out. We love you guys for coming out and having having some good conversation there while we're talking and everything. And you keep us in line and you keep us motivated. And so very happy that you guys came out. But that's going to do it for this week. We'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye. Be a part of the live show by being a member of the Sin Club at Patreon at patreon.com/cinemasins. Chat with us on the Cinemasins Discord at discord.gg/cinemasins or Cinemasins Twitter at Cinemasins, and email any comments or questions to Recotopia at cinemasins.com. That's RECOTOPIA at cinemasins.com.
Hey, my garage door was less expensive to fix than I thought.
Oh, that's good.
He was like, oh yeah, I'm 99% sure you'll never be able to tell this ever happened when I'm done. And I was like, right, excellent.
Yeah.
I was worried I was going to have to replace the whole thing or something.
No, it's usually just like, unless you somehow were going so fast it bent like the feed bars or something. It's usually just a panel replacement and a few metal parts. But
I like that you have that much experience with it.
I do.
Well, you did. I have a friend who has 2 boys, and he's always telling me, like, my son just did this. What the hell was he thinking? And it's just fun to hear those stories because boys are just freaking weird, man.
Yeah, there's not a lot of forethought going on in the young male's brain
Yeah,
in general.
Anyway, I'm not trying to say that like young ladies have it like easier or something, but being a teenage boy, just you don't know what to do with all the stuff you're feeling, and so you do weird shit.
Jeremy sums up adolescence.
I should write a book.
Did you guys see that The Brutalist is now under fire for AI stuff?
Yes, and I'm kind of bummed about it. I mean,
I wanted to hear your take on this because AI is this really interesting world we're entering where, like, I'm not sure how we're going to make peace with whatever we're going to make peace with, but it's like right now, if anybody gets the scent of AI, it's just like, you're the devil. You know,
well, it's so anti-creative, man.
No, I get it. Yeah.
There are a couple different stands you can take if you're against AI, and one is moral, right? Like there's an artist somewhere starving because you let AI do this instead of hiring them. And then, it's bad for the environment. Like I keep seeing like articles about like how many gallons of water it takes for Chat GPT to return like 5 answers or something, and it's just I hate that they used AI on this movie. It seems like all of the conversation today and yesterday is about the voices. So they speak a couple times in Hungarian. The director's Hungarian. It's a very hard language to speak correctly, he says. So he used AI to make their Hungarian sound more Hungarian.
Mm-hmm.
That feels anti-art to me. But I also read 4 days ago when this first broke, and I haven't seen anybody talking about this since, that they used AI on some of the architecture in the background too. Not CG that artists created, but AI to create some fancy architecture in the background of the shot as well. So I don't like that at all. If we're going to disqualify Dune 2's score because they reused part of the score from the first movie, then The Brutalist should be disqualified for this stuff, for sure, in my opinion. What do you think?
From like what? From like cinematography, that kind of stuff? Like,
just, yeah, I mean...
Or just in general, you don't think it should be eligible for awards at all?
I'm not the guy who's going to crusade. I'm not the leader here. But yeah, I think it should. I think it's very anti-art.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Chris.
If everything else though is the acting, the directing, and all, you mean the design itself, not the movie itself, right? Like you're not saying the movie can't be eligible for award, or are you saying yes, the movie instantly disqualifies itself by using any AI?
I think that I need more time to think about it, but I think that I lean that way for sure. If you had a movie that came to the Oscars and you found out, a month beforehand that one of the actors wasn't real, was CG, like the movie Simone or what have you, right?
Right.
I would disqualify that movie from all categories, even score.
But why though? Why, if the score was done by someone who's human and thought that up on their own, then
I'm just saying, again, I'm not trying to make a concrete position today in 5 minutes worth of time, but I feel like
no, you are held to this forever.
I feel like it spoils the whole thing for me.
I'm also like steadily becoming less and less enamored with AI, especially because of the fact that it seems to steal from a lot of sources to get to something that looks unique. And then, the environment thing I had not realized until they started doing some. I mean, it sounds like it's way too much for what it's worth. So,
yeah.
I don't know. They may get it to the point where it does its own thing, so to speak. It inherently knows. I don't know, but I'm not all the way there on like let's take all awards away yet. From a movie because it uses a little bit somewhere. But I don't know. It is getting to that point where I'm starting to just go, I don't know if I approve of any of this right now.
Yeah, it is definitely something I'm pondering, and in general, I more see myself as like a curious, thoughtful onlooker when it comes to this kind of stuff, just like trying to figure stuff out and be open-minded enough not to just, dismiss everything, but like there are so many different factors in this that I just don't know how to process them all. What I do know is that technology in general wins. It just becomes what it is. So like, there is this level of ethical observation of how technology advances as opposed to like stopping it from being a thing. Because I just think we know from too much history that, technology is going to advance because people want to do cool new things with technology or whatever. In a situation like this actually doesn't bother me too much, other than like the idea of, some of the environmental things that you mentioned. But to change the accent on a voice, that doesn't annoy me too much. The stuff in the background was a 80s style thing that was running at I don't know if you either or both of you have seen the movie, but at the end there's like a tribute thing, and there's like an 80s video running in the background on something that I think was AI generated. I don't think any of the actual architecture in the movie was AI generated. I think it was this one part of the video.
I guess we just need to. We've been saying AI this whole conversation, and I still don't think he's actually using AI. I think he's using machine learning software. But again, what is the difference between taking Adrian Brody's vocal track and a human being sitting with a piece of software and putting filters on it and altering it, versus taking Adrian Brody's vocal track and giving it to a piece of software and say, spit it back to me in Hungarian, or you know what I mean? Like, there's a difference there. It may seem small, but I guess I feel like anything that takes a job away from a human being is something that I'm going to question.
I mean, but isn't that what technology does? Is take jobs away from human beings? Like,
yeah.
I mean, that
doesn't make it good.
But it can. Like, if you look long term, right? Like, if we start talking about long term,
I can't look long term, man. I'm going to be dead 100 years before the shit you're about to talk about happens. I can't live on.
But I'm just saying, like, email. Same thing could have been said about email, that it takes jobs from, human beings, and it has. And the U.S. Postal Service is, trashed because of it. Like, but it's just, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard as things advance.
It reminds me of that conversation we had with Andy Weir when he was talking about post-scarcity and all that other stuff. And I'm like, there was one thing that I felt like was missing from that conversation. I said, surely there's people out there who still want to do this and that and the other thing. And he's like, no, but everybody's just, machines are just going to do everything. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's a one thing we can get into is there's going to be a rough period where nobody is making money and nobody is able to survive if everything is being done by machines. And so, like, what do the people do while we wait for that utopia to show up that we're talking about with post-scarcity and everything? And I'm just like, there's definitely going to be a really bad period where, like, okay, well, we got machines to do everything. Now what?
Look at the people who are now in charge of our country. Do you think they're going to let machines do everything and then start giving money to people for free? Mm-hmm. Hey, the machines can do everything now. Go get a coffee. We love you. Yeah. No, they're not.
Right. Are you saying that human nature is going to play a role in all this, Jeremy? Are you saying?
Yes, and it's bad, Aaron. You and I disagree on religion, but we should both agree that human nature is bad.
I think we actually agree on religion, but there are some philosophical differences we have in how we see the world.
We're gonna make that. Ooh, that's a little fine line thing that Aaron just did.
A podcast.
Yeah, it's listen, again, it's why I kind of relegate myself sometimes just being observer and just kind of going, okay, this is interesting. The world around me is changing. I'm not sure how I affect that or change that, or what conversations I have and what those mean, but man, it's going to be interesting as technology advances, for sure.
Jesus.
You're welcome.